All right, let's dive into this. The story of Khalid ibn al-Walid. Talk about a fascinating figure. The guy goes from like sworn enemy of the Prophet Muhammad to becoming this legend, the sword of Allah, right? I mean, it's a story that just captivated people for centuries, and I'm really excited to kind of explore it.
It really is. It's a story with just so many twists and turns, battles and betrayals, and ultimately it's like this really profound journey of faith.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to unpack today using two lectures by Dr. Omar Suleiman. They're available on Yakin Institute's YouTube channel. And our mission, you ask. Well, to figure out how Khalid, born into a family that was completely against Islam, became one of its most celebrated figures. So get ready, because there's some surprising insights coming up. This journey is anything but straightforward.
Yeah, for sure. So, first, let's set the stage. Imagine 7th century Arabia. Think tribal rivalries, shifting alliances. This is where Khalid comes in. Born into the Banu Makhzum, one of the most powerful, wealthy tribes in Mecca, rivals of the Prophet Muhammad's tribe.
So basically, he's born into this world where Islam is seen as a direct threat.
Absolutely. His father, AlWaleed ibn al-Mughira, was like the ultimate opponent of the Prophet Muhammad's message.
Hmm.
I mean, think about it. He was like the epitome of the Meccan elite, fiercely protective of their traditions, their power, all of that. In fact, he was so against Islam that he offered to trade his own son, Khalid, for the Prophet's life.
Wow, that's intense. Imagine being like a bargaining chip in that kind of conflict. It shows you just how high the stakes were, how deep those divisions ran.
It really does. And it also says a lot about Khalid's value. Even as like a young guy, he was already known for being this exceptional warrior. Horsemanship, swordsmanship, archery, you name it.
Like he was almost destined for greatness on the battlefield, right?
Mm,
But then his path takes this totally unexpected turn. It makes you think all those skills honed in opposition to Islam, they end up becoming assets for the Muslim community later on,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it is a fascinating paradox. Now, while Khalid is out there mastering warfare, his father, Al-Walid, has this interesting kind of complex encounter with Islam. He sees the beauty of the Quran. He even kind of admits its power.
But his pride gets in the way. And then there's his nephew, Abu Jahl, another major opponent of the Prophet, who has a big influence on him.
Right. Abu Jahl,
Yeah.
master manipulator. Right. He convinces al-Walid that if they accept Islam, their tribe loses its standing, its influence. Think about that. Rejecting this huge spiritual truth just to keep their social status. And there are even verses in the Quran that talk about al-Walid's arrogance and, well, the consequences of that.
So Khalid grows up hearing his father and Abu Jahl constantly putting down the Prophet, right? Rejecting Islam all the time. That must have seriously shaped how he saw the faith, right?
Oh, without a doubt. He probably just saw Islam through the lens of tribal rivalry and politics. No clue about the huge transformation it would have on him later.
So what about Khalid's first actual encounters with the Muslims? He didn't just jump into battle right away, did he?
Actually, his first interactions were pretty indirect. He missed the Battle of Badr, huge moment in early Islamic history, because he was off on a trade route.
Maybe that was lucky for the Muslims, given what a warrior he was.
Yeah, could be. But fate, or maybe divine providence, had different plans. Later on, he travels to Medina to try and ransom his brother, Al-Walid ibn al-Walid, who'd been captured by the Muslims.
And this is where things start to get really interesting, right?
Right. Imagine Khalid's surprise. He goes back to Mecca, and his brother has embraced Islam and gone back to Medina.
No way. That must have been a total mix of emotions. Relief that his brother's safe, sure, but also like confusion, maybe even a sense of betrayal, right? I mean, he's trying to ransom his brother from the enemy, and his brother decides to join them.
Definitely a turning point, no question. Plants these seeds of doubt in Khalid's mind. His own brother choosing Islam over everything, family, tribe, everything he knew. This isn't just a political thing anymore, it's something way deeper.
It makes you wonder what was going through his head during those early encounters with the Muslims. Did he see something different in them?
It's hard to know for sure, but you can bet those encounters were chipping away at his ideas about them. Then comes the Battle of Uhud. Khalid actually leads the Meccan forces to victory against the Muslims.
Yeah, a big setback for the early Muslims, right? He uses his tactical skills to ambush them. Huge losses.
Yeah, but even in that victory, there are stories that suggest he's starting to question things, his allegiances.
Really? What makes you say that?
While some historical accounts talk about him seeing how strong the Muslims' faith was, even in defeat, they're disciplined, they're praying, they believe in God, even facing death, and it seems to affect him.
So the seeds of doubt are definitely there. But what were those key events that really pushed him towards Islam?
So we're back diving deeper into the story of Khalid ibn al-Walid. Last time, we left him struggling with his doubts about Islam. He'd seen the Muslims' faith and discipline firsthand.
Yeah, it was like he was caught between two worlds, the world he grew up in and this new, powerful thing he was seeing in the Muslim community.
Exactly. And a few key events really make this conflict worse for him. One of them is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, this peace agreement between the Muslims and the Meccans. You see, on the surface, it seemed like a win for the Meccans, but the Prophet Muhammad was playing the long game. It was a really strategic move.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Even Khalid, this brilliant warrior and strategist, he was impressed by the Prophet's vision and the Muslims' willingness to compromise for peace.
Yeah.
It totally challenged what he thought about who had the upper hand.
Totally. He sees them praying, even with the threat of conflict hanging over them. And it shows him how strong their beliefs really were. This wasn't just about tribes anymore. It was about something much bigger.
Like he was getting this inside look, seeing the real Islam beyond all the politics and fear, right? But it wasn't just what was happening around him. His own brother played a big part too, right?
Oh, absolutely. AlWaleed ibn al-Walid, after becoming Muslim, he keeps trying to share Islam with Khalid, right? Letters, conversations, patiently answering his questions. It's that dawah.
That must have meant a lot to Khalid, hearing about Islam from someone who understood where he was coming from, someone who'd been there himself.
For sure. And it wasn't just him. Even the Prophet Muhammad, who was known for his compassion, right? He sent messages to Khalid through his brother, showing respect, acknowledging Khalid's skills as a warrior, hoping to soften his heart. Imagine that, being on the receiving end of that kind of outreach from your supposed enemy.
Really shows the Prophet's character, his understanding of people. It wasn't about crushing his opponents, it was about winning them over. And then there's this story about a wedding that was really important in Khalid's journey.
Right, the wedding of the Prophet's niece, Muna bint Abi Talib. This was like a carefully planned event, trying to bring the Muslims and Meccans closer together.
So the Prophet picks a groom from a powerful Meccan family and invites a lot of non-Muslims, including Khalid, to the feast.
It was a gesture of, well, goodwill, trying to create some space for talking and understanding, and it looks like it really got to Khalid, made him soften up even more towards Islam.
Amazing how a simple act of hospitality can break down those barriers, right?
Hmm.
But it wasn't all about diplomacy and reason. There's also this crazy story about a dream Khalid had.
Yeah. This dream is often seen as the final push towards his conversion. So he dreams he's escaping this barren, closed-off land and finds himself in this big, lush garden.
That's powerful imagery, right? Like a metaphor for his own spiritual journey, leaving his old beliefs behind and stepping into this vast new world of Islam.
Exactly. Later, he finds out that the dream was interpreted as him moving from disbelief to the beauty and open space of faith.
Wow. So you got all this happening, his brother's dawah, the Prophet's kindness, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, in this, it's a vivid dream, right? Like all these forces are pushing him to make a change. What was the final straw, though? What finally makes him say yes to Islam?
It wasn't some big revelation or anything. It was actually pretty human, pretty relatable. So Khalid is wrestling with all these doubts, but he's also drawn to Islam, right? So he tries to talk to his friends and family.
Looking for support, wanting to share what he's going through, right? But it doesn't go well, does it?
Nope, not at all. He's met with hostility, people making fun of him, even threats. Imagine that Khalid, the great warrior, rejected by his own people just for thinking about a new path.
Ouch. That must have hurt. The very people he fought for, defended, they turn on him for questioning their beliefs.
He's totally stuck between two worlds. His own tribe pushes him away, but he's drawn to Islam. It was a moment of real isolation, a real test of his courage and his faith.
And in that moment, he makes a choice that changes everything for him and for history.
He chooses Islam. He can't deny the truth anymore. He takes this huge step and becomes Muslim, along with two other companions, Amr ibn al-As and Uthman ibn Talha.
What a powerful moment. And it didn't take long for him to put his new faith into action, did it?
Nope. Just a few weeks later, he's fighting alongside the Muslims at the Battle of Mu'tah. They're up against the Byzantine Empire. Talk about a trial by fire.
Hold on. He went from resisting Islam to fighting for it in a matter of weeks.
Right. What a whirlwind. And this wasn't just any battle. It was like a desperate fight, totally outnumbered, a test of courage and leadership. It's where Khalid earns his reputation as the Sword of Allah.
Okay, tell me everything about this battle. How does a new convert like Khalid become such a legend?
Well, early on, the Battle of Mu'tah was a disaster for the Muslims. They were outnumbered, their leaders were falling left and right, it was bad, morale was low, defeat seemed inevitable.
Sounds like a moment that needed a hero, someone to step up and turn things around.
And Khalid, even though he was a new Muslim, he rose to the occasion. He took command, inspired the troops with his strategy and courage. Picture it. Chaos, the enemy closing in, and this new Muslim steps forward, sword in one hand, faith in the other.
Wow, like a scene from a movie. What did he actually do to turn the tide?
He used all these clever tactics, confusing the Byzantines with surprise attacks and disappearing acts. Feints, diversions, that kind of thing.
He was playing mind games with them, wearing them down.
Exactly. By the time they actually clashed, the Byzantines were exhausted and confused.
Oh, and get this. Khalid kills their commander, Hormuz, one-on-one, before the main battle even starts.
Yeah. Seeing their leader taken down by the sword of Allah completely demoralized the Byzantines. They were routed.
What a victory. Must have shocked the Byzantine Empire. This wasn't what they expected from these desert Arabs.
Definitely a turning point. Established the Muslims as a serious force. And Khalid didn't stop there. Victory after victory, capturing forts, liberating land, just decimating the Persian armies.
He was a nightmare for them. His reputation as a brilliant commander just kept growing.
Even the Byzantine Empire, the Persians' old rivals, they started to notice these Muslims, who they thought were no big deal, were suddenly a real threat.
So now both superpowers are facing this common enemy. Did they team up to try and crush the Muslims?
Not officially, but they definitely shifted their focus. Abu Bakr, realizing how dangerous things were getting, sent reinforcements to fight the Byzantines. And he knew exactly who he needed to lead them.
Khalid, of course. He was on a roll. So from the deserts of Persia to the battlefields of the Levant, Khalid's journey continued.
Yeah, always on the move, facing new challenges, changing his tactics to suit the land and the enemy.
There's even that crazy story about him sacrificing his camels to get to the water stored in their bodies during a march across the desert. That's thinking outside the box.
Hey, do what you gotta do, right? Shows how resourceful he was, how committed to his mission. He knew his leadership was crucial for his troops, for their success.
So he reaches Syria, ready to face the mighty Byzantine Empire.
And that's where one of the most important battles in Islamic history goes down, the Battle of Yarmouk. It was huge, 25,000 Muslims against a Byzantine army 4 times their size. Everything was at stake.
And right in the middle of it all is Khalid, the sword of Allah, leading the Muslim forces with his signature mix of tactics, strategy, and faith.
Yarmouk was the culmination of everything Khalid had learned, everything he'd become. Rapid maneuvers, feints, psychological warfare, the whole package. He turned the Byzantines' own numbers against them.
And the result? A huge victory for the Muslims, right? Shattered the Byzantines' control of the Levant. Khalid's reputation as one of history's greatest military minds was cemented.
No doubt. But while all this was happening, things were changing back in Medina. Abu Bakr, the first caliph, passed away.
And Umar ibn al-Khattab, another close companion of the Prophet, becomes the new caliph.
Umar, he was known for being pious, just really understanding the principles of Islam. And he had this unique take on Khalid's role, which led to one of the most talked about events in Khalid's life.
This is where it gets really interesting. Umar decides to replace Khalid as commander. People have been debating that decision for centuries. Some say it was personal, that Umar was jealous of Khalid's success.
Honestly, that doesn't fit with what we know about Umar. He was a man of faith, integrity, always putting the Muslim community first. So we're going to look at the real reasons behind his decision and what it tells us about leadership in a growing empire.
I'm all ears. Why replace the winningest general in the army?
Think about the time, right? The Muslims are winning battle after battle, expanding, feeling unstoppable.
And naturally, people start giving Khalid all the credit. I mean, he was undefeated.
Exactly. And that's where Umar saw a problem. The danger of, hero worship. People were saying things like, with Khalid, we can't lose.
Right, that kind of thinking, while tempting, can be dangerous. Makes people put too much emphasis on human power instead of Allah. So last time we were talking about Umar's decision to replace Khalid as commander. It was a bold move, and honestly, still sparks debate today.
It does, but, like we said, attributing all those victories to Khalid alone could have been dangerous, right?
Correct.
Spiritually, for the Muslims.
Right, shifting the focus from faith in Allah to faith in, a person. Right. But it's still hard to imagine being in Khalid's shoes, even if he understood why.
Yeah, it's one thing to understand it intellectually, but another to actually experience it.
Exactly. So how did Khalid actually take the news?
Well, according to the accounts, when Umar told him, Khalid just said, "We hear and we obey." No complaints, no bitterness, nothing. Just pure acceptance, ready to serve whatever his role.
Wow, talk about humility.
Mhm.
He really understood that his commitment was to Islam, to Allah, not to some title or position.
Exactly. And Umar was smart. He knew Khalid was still valuable. He kept him around as an advisor, someone to go to for strategy. Khalid stayed involved, contributing to the Muslim conquest, just in a different way.
So it was more like a shift in leadership, a way to balance things out, not some personal attack on Khalid.
Right. Umar was all about thinking ahead. He knew that winning battles took more than just military power. It needed strong faith, a united purpose, and a clear understanding of what true strength really meant.
And Khalid, even with all those victories, he got it.
Yeah.
He knew he was there to serve something bigger than himself, and he did it with everything he had, no matter what his title was.
It's a lesson in leadership for sure, and humility, right? How to balance worldly success with keeping your spirit grounded. True strength isn't just about what you achieve, it's about connecting to something bigger.
So Khalid kept fighting, even without being the top general. But his time on the battlefield did eventually end, not in some glorious last stand, but in a much quieter way.
Yeah, he passed away in his bed in Homs in 642 after being sick for a while. Maybe not the warrior's death you'd expect, but it gave him time to reflect, to connect with his faith more deeply.
I read that he wished he'd spent more time studying the Quran, really going deeper into his faith earlier in life.
Yeah, he felt like he'd focused so much on fighting that he hadn't focused enough on his spiritual growth. And he wanted others to learn from that, to put their relationship with the Allah first.
But he knew, when he passed, that his legacy, the sword of Allah, would live on and inspire people for generations.
And what a legacy it is. Khalid ibn AlWaleed, from resisting Islam to becoming one of its biggest champions. His story shows us how powerful faith can be, how redemption is possible for anyone, and how important humility is, even when you achieve amazing things.
His life was full of conquests, change, and in the end, surrendering to Allah's will. It makes you think about your own beliefs, your own priorities, how we connect with the divine.
If Khalid, this incredible warrior, could find peace and purpose in his faith, it makes you think about what real strength actually is, right?
Definitely something to think about. And hey, if you want to learn more, we highly recommend Dr. Omar Suleiman's lectures on Yaqeen Institute's YouTube channel. They're a goldmine of information about Khalid.
Khalid's journey proves that anyone can change, and that real strength comes from aligning ourselves with Allah's will.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring the amazing world of history and the human spirit.